Hi guys, it's Ellen Brock, freelance editor. This week we've been talking about scene structure, we've talked about the goal and the conflict, and today I want to talk about the importance of the protagonist being proactive. So a really common problem is for writers to think of the character being proactive as the character being actiony or heroic, doing a lot of physical activity, but that's not what being proactive is about. In order for your character to be proactive, all they need to do is take some sort of step towards solving a problem. This can be anything from signing up to a play because they think that by being the star in a play that they can become popular. It could be going to a location to try to get some information that they need. It could be obtaining an item that they feel is necessary to continue their journey. There are lots of ways that the character can be proactive. The key is that the character must be doing something on their own. They can have the support of other characters, but they need to be making decisions that drive the plot, and they need to not be relying on other characters to just tell them what to do. So being proactive is very closely connected to the goal. It stems very logically. So when you have your goal established, it's very easy to see how the character could be proactive. If the character wants to get to a certain location, they actually go and try to get to that location. The key is that when the conflict actually occurs, when something maybe blocks them from getting to that location, the protagonist still has to take some sort of step to solve that problem. Another common problem is that the bad guy or the villain, whoever's standing in the way, will sometimes sort of just give in to the character. So maybe the character wants to get a piece of information, and in this scene, the antagonistic force is the person with the information doesn't want to give it to the main character. And so the protagonist goes up to this character, says, I want this information, and the character who does not want to reveal the information sort of talks themselves into giving the information to the protagonist, and the protagonist doesn't actually have to do anything. Another problem is that the antagonistic force might present the solution to the problem, and this doesn't have the same kind of strength as the protagonist suggesting the solution. So maybe the protagonist asks this character for the information, and the character responds by saying something like, if I had this loaf of bread that I want, then I would give you this information. It's often stronger to, instead of doing it that way, have the protagonist suggest what they think would be a solution. So the protagonist might observe that this character wants this loaf of bread, and then the protagonist is the one who suggests, hey, I could get you this loaf of bread. If I do that, will you give me the information? And that's a way more proactive way for the character to respond to the problem. So if the protagonist is proactive only in the beginning of the scene, that's a really good start. But it can be a little bit weakening if the protagonist faces an obstacle and that obstacle just sort of like blows past, or the obstacle is resolved by another character. And it's a lot better if the protagonist demonstrates their own ability to solve the problem. So it's important to keep in mind when you're developing your character's reaction that you give them something to do that makes it seem like they thought of it on their own, that they're exercising their brain, that they're using skills. And even if the character is relatively incompetent at the beginning of the story and is making a lot of mistakes and probably isn't really going to go about solving the conflicts in a productive way, it's still really helpful if that character is in some way doing something that they thought of, their own idea, using their skill set, even if it makes the situation worse, which it might. A really good example of this idea is in Toy Story. So in Toy Story, Woody wants to be the favorite toy. And he goes about solving that problem of Buzz coming in and Buzz Lightyear becomes the favorite toy. And he wants to solve this problem, but he doesn't have the right mentality, and he has this character flaw, and so he doesn't solve it in a constructive way in the beginning. So one of the things that he does, which is proactive, is he knocks Buzz out the window. Now, obviously, this is not a good way to solve this problem, but it was an idea that Woody came up with by himself, and he executed it by himself, and he was being proactive in the face of a conflict, even though what he was doing was misguided and made the situation worse. So definitely keep that in mind when you are coming up with your character's reactions, that their own solutions and the things they come up with are probably not going to be correct in the early parts of the novel, and that's just part of what inspires more conflict, and it's part of how you can just really develop a rich, complicated story with lots of twists and turns. It's also a great way to demonstrate characterization and to demonstrate growth, because you can parallel the early scenes with the later scenes in terms of how the character responds to the situation. So you may have a scene early on where a character doesn't know how to use magic to solve a situation, tries to do it without magic and just ruins the whole situation, messes everything up. And then later in the second half of the novel, the character needs to use magic to solve a problem, does it, and they succeed. And this demonstrates growth. So this is why being proactive can be so important in terms of showing the character development. It gives you an opportunity to parallel scenes and to demonstrate how your character's ability to solve problems changes and grows over the course of the novel. So I hope this gives you a better idea of how to have your character be more proactive in your scenes. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about the last aspect of proactive scenes, which is the effect that the scene has on the novel, or how you can create a chain reaction. This is really important when you are trying to create a compelling and exciting plot. So I hope that you will subscribe and like this video and come back tomorrow, and I will see you then.